So when you come together, it's like, this is all of me, and I'm bringing all of me, all the good, all the bad, everything. I'm bringing all of me to you, to us, to create something great together. Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. Take a moment to think about the evolution of your own sexual journey as a couple. How far have you come in the last year, by the way, or the last 2 years, or the last 5 years? Is what's important to you today the same things that were important to you in the last 2 or 5 years? I bet they're different. It's then reasonable to assume that what's important to you today, sexually, could be different a year or 5 or even 10 years from now. In this episode, you'll get to hear this conversation I had with Amy and Greg Langford, where we talk about the 5 phases of a sexual relationship. See which phase you find yourself in today and learn what's ahead for you. My guest, Amy Langford, interviewed me on her new podcast called Undressing Intimacy. It shares many of the same themes we discuss on this podcast. Amy works with me at my in-person couples retreats, such as the one coming up in March, which I hope you're coming to, and also in my signature program, the Get Your Marriage On program, which a lot of couples do online. This program is great for individuals or couples that are ready to take their marriage to the next level. It's essentially the online version of what we teach at our in-person retreats, but a little bit more in depth. The program is built on principles of action and implementation, not just head knowledge, because we all know that action is sexy, right? And many of the nearly 300 individuals that have been through the program are experiencing real differences for good in their marriage. Valentine's Day this year is on a Friday, February 14th. This year, we want to do something we've never done before. Celebrate it with you, with a romantic and sexy virtual retreat. How it works is that you and your sweetheart can join us from a cozy hotel or from home, where we'll teach you and guide you through a sexual practice that's fun and deeply connecting over 3 sessions on Friday and Saturday. Join us live or catch the recordings afterwards. More details are on our website under Retreats and then Virtual Retreat, or check out the link in the show notes below.
Hello, welcome to this next episode number 11 of Undressing Intimacy. And today we have a special guest that we're super excited for. And I wanted to take a minute and introduce this guest because I get to work with him quite often. Dan Purcell owns Get Your Marriage On and runs the Next Level program, which is a program to help couples up-level and thrive in their marriage and intimacy. He also has a fabulous podcast called Get Your Marriage On with great resources, guests, information, all sorts of things, and an amazing website to refer to, as well as 2 apps, which we talk about all the time. Just Between Us, a private texting app for couples, and Intimately Us, another app for couples with so many resources on it.
Not only this, but we love Dan's family.
Yes.
Got time to spend with him. He has a lovely wife,
Emily,
and
6 kiddos.
That's right.
Whom we just think the world of. So I get to work with him in his Next Level program, helping couples in their marriage. We also work together on retreats, and we get to bring couples in, and Dan hosts amazing retreats, which right now, Dan, there is a retreat for sale, is there not?
There is. It's in March, and we're pulling out all the stops. This is going to be, for sure, by far, the best retreat we've ever done. We're adding an extra night. We're just getting better and better. There's so much value that's going to be offered there. I hope everyone listening to this seriously considers coming if your circumstances allow.
Yes. On getyourmarriageon.com, there's a button on the website for retreat. You can click on that, find all the details. It's the last weekend in March, and we have coaching, we have teaching, we have fun, we have food, we have beautiful accommodations. You'll want to be there. It's going to be amazing.
And I even got relegated from the back of the classroom to the front last time.
Yeah.
So we might be able to see that too.
Greggy gets to help teach too. So
It's awesome.
That's super fun. Our couples that have gone have really appreciated the learning, the connection, the activities, the experience. So I encourage you to go check it out. Okay, but today we wanted to bring Dan on and talk about intimacy. Shocking. So Dan has developed what he calls the life cycle of intimacy with 5 different phases in this cycle. And we thought it would be awesome to bring him on and have this discussion with him about intimacy and these phases and this life cycle. So, Dan, thank you for coming today. We appreciate that. And let's hear all about this.
Great. My pleasure. And if I can just take a moment and just say how much I absolutely love working with you, Amy and Greg. And we talked about the retreat briefly, but you two are a powerhouse couple. It's like a 1-2 punch. It's fantastic. But not just that. Amy, you're a fantastic coach in the sense that you are very compassionate, you care about others, and you're expert in the advice and guidance that you give the people, the hundreds of couples in our program that just benefit greatly from your wisdom. So it's a pleasure to be here and associate with you.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
All right, let's jump into it. What is phase number 1, Dan?
Great. Phase number 1 is, I call this the beginning. This is when you're, for example, newlywed. You're in a new sexual relationship and everything is brand new. You're figuring out where things go. You're figuring out what works, what doesn't work, what things to say, what things not to say, how to apologize when things don't go right. Like all of those things are part of phase 1. It's a beautiful and wonderful phase. Now, there's some things in phase 1 that kind of get you, it's the creation phase. So everything's like kind of like jello in the beginning, where you mix the packet in, you add the warm water and you're whisking and things are kind of setting up, and then you put it in the fridge to really kind of have it gel. That's like what's going on in phase 1. You start learning patterns, you start saying, I cannot bring this up because if I do, it upsets my spouse. This is where they say sex is made up of leftovers. And what they mean is like a Venn diagram of all things I think are interesting and gross, and all the things she thinks is interesting and gross. And we participate in what the overlap is. So it's discovering what the overlap of those two circles where they overlap. That's the creation phase, when we figure out what is sex going to look like in our relationship.
And I think as couples, we bring in so many different perspectives, right? It's our backgrounds, our families, our churches, wherever we come from with what we've learned and experienced into this. And so we're bringing these into this relationship and really like mixing it up and see what comes out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. For me, in my marriage, I remember distinctly things were brand new to both of us. And we were students in university at the time. And we attended a conference, and the speaker was talking about marriages. And he said a statement that really had an influence on our gelling of our jello, so to speak. And he said something like, anything that is unnatural does not belong in the sexual relationship, or something along those lines. But he didn't define what is natural and unnatural. So for us, it was left to our own interpretation. And my interpretation at that time was, well, natural means missionary position in the dark for 10 minutes. So anything outside of that isn't good in the marriage. That's what I had absorbed. And so that became the way our marriage was in the beginning, in our phase 1 of, because anything outside of that is wrong. We don't want to do what's wrong. We want to do what's right. So we'll keep it within these really tight bounds and limits.
In that creation phase, you're really influenced by outside sources and by outside environments, and maybe even your past, what you're bringing in, the stories, the narratives you have about yourself, your sexuality, what's moral, what's immoral. Those are very influential in that phase, it sounds like.
Right. Yes. And you're also heavily influenced by what your spouse thinks. Like, for example, my spouse might say, hey, I want to try oral sex. And I'm like, oh, gross. No, I don't think we should be doing that. She'll go, yeah, me too. I agree. We shouldn't be doing that either. Yeah. You know how you kind of do that? Like,
if they just fold into them.
Right. And I think that makes sense because you're both like really sensitive to the other person thinks, because you're not so sure yourself. And if your
Mhm.
spouse isn't so sure, then it's hard for you to kind of stand on your own if you're not sure. So
Right.
that's
And this is a really
really
new area for a lot of people, right? When you start
right.
out in marriage, it's not like newly married. You've been married to this person before. So all of this is new and unknown and undefined. And
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of variables coming into play all at once.
Right.
Now, all of us have spent some time in this area, so we know kind of what to expect there. And we've
Uh-huh.
also seen this as we've coached, and it's been fun because we've had at least one of these couples in our retreats for every retreat, and it's been fun to see where they're at. So, what are some of the tips we can give the couples in this phase right now that would help them the most? What do you think, Dan?
Well, for every phase, it solves a problem and at the same time creates a new problem.
Mm.
So just recognize every phase has its own good, it has its purpose. The good that
Mhm.
it's doing is it's establishing a sexual relationship and how it's going to be in this dynamic, in this intimate relationship.
Mhm.
So that's the good, but it also sets you up for the next phase, which we'll get to talk about next. So the advice I would give them is get a healthy sexual education best you can, whether it's from good books, podcasts, apps, retreats, people you trust. The A comprehensive healthy sexual education will help you from the get-go, give you a great advantage over peers that don't have as comprehensive of a sex education. um, so that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I
Awesome.
think also enjoy it, right? This is an exciting time, right? And oftentimes we're so nervous, are we doing it right or wrong, or is this how we're supposed to be, or does society tell us it's supposed to look different, or this is the exploratory time, right? This is we're so nervous in doing it, but I would just say don't rush out of this because the next phase is going to come faster than you think. And
That's
Right.
we'll talk about what that means here in a second.
Yes.
But enjoy yourselves,
Enjoy it
right?
while it
In
lasts.
this phase, like
Uh-huh.
don't rush out of it. Just enjoy it and be willing to learn and to grow.
and to explore.
Yep.
Mhm.
Good.
Okay, Dan, what's the next phase?
Phase two is when things kind of you kind of create just a like a schedule or a system, and things kind of work more or less on clockwork. Like you really know what you can expect from your spouse and how things are going to go. This is also a phase for a lot of couples where they've taken on additional responsibilities usually. Children might be in the picture now. There's a job, there's a mortgage, and there's other stresses in life that are urgent, making sex kind of less of front and center like it would have been right at the
Mhm.
beginning. It's more
Mhm.
in the background. And so oftentimes a common hallmark of a phase 2 marriage is it's just a lot of quickies with once in a while something a little more gourmet.
Maybe a
Partially
lot of
because
vanilla or routine.
yes. Yep, exactly. Because there isn't a lot of room to explore. It's more like we've established this routine and it's working for us, at least to some degree, and we're able to kind of juggle everything else about a relationship that matters. This is also the sweatpants phase, as they say in the relationship. You're past the 18 months or so of the honeymoon bump. The novelty has worn off, and the opposites that you found so attractive in your spouse in the beginning now become irritants. So I
Mhm.
really like that my spouse is so extroverted or so and spontaneous all the time. All of a sudden turns into how come they can't like remember where they put the car keys and when are they going to give me attention? Right? Those
Mhm.
things that drew us to them in the first place can kind of become irritants in this phase also. So it's kind of like incorporating all of that and how it plays into the sexual relationship really defines this phase.
Mm.
Yeah, I think we easily go into this phase too, right? Especially because the roles that we've been told that we have to go do and all the things that come up that we are responsible for, and so it just naturally flows into this phase where we get into a scheduled partnership instead of this more exciting, like let's discover each other phase we were in before.
This is where we meet a lot of couples in coaching. They're
Mhm.
like, "Okay, we're just stuck. We're in the same routine all the time, doing the same thing, and it's not fun anymore. There's
Right.
no spark, there's no aliveness, there's no meaning." There's no flirting or playing or dating. It's just routine.
Exactly. So phase two solves a problem and creates a problem at the same time. And that's the problem it creates. It's the, I don't want sameness. We're in a rut. I'm kind of sick and tired of this. Yep.
Mhm.
Which propels you into phase three.
Okay, tell us about phase 3.
Phase three is when novelty becomes really important again. This is when you want to break out of the routine. You actually want to try something else. It's not that you're ungrateful for what you had in phase two, but you realize you just can't keep living life that way.
Mm.
You think there's something more for you. So we often look for novelty in our sexual experiences to kind of break us out of phase two. And this is the phase I was in personally when I started my work 7 years ago. I was phase two and really looking for something more. And so anything, ideas, or exciting, adventurous things that will add spark and excitement to an otherwise routine bedroom routine really
Mhm.
drew me in, really appealed to me because I'm really seeking those things, thinking that will solve the problems that we're having in phase two.
I have a question. What about a lot of the couples that we see, there might be one spouse in phase 2 of maintenance and feeling like even that maintenance is more than they can manage, and another leaning into phase 3, wanting the novelty and more spark and more aliveness, and then now you've got this discrepancy.
Yeah, I would think to a degree they're both wanting something different than what they
Mhm.
have. Just the way they're going about it is different. And once we understand in that lens, I think it makes more sense because for the spouse that is in the routine, that's all I can handle. I'm stereotypes here because about 70% of the couples we work with, he's the higher desire spouse, she's a lower desire spouse here. She might be more like, I would really like something just kinda give me a sense of freedom. I don't wanna feel like I'm obligated and that I have to
Mhm.
keep doing this. She might be sick of the phase 2 problems too, but her way of solving it would look very differently than probably his way of trying to solve it. His way could be like, "No, we need to try different sexual behaviors. We need to try different positions. We need to try."
Different toys, different.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. And what they're really after is, I want to break out of the routine. I want something that feels different. But for
Mhm.
the other person, they don't like the old meanings either.
She probably wants more emotional novelty, and he probably wants more physical novelty.
There's a couple I've worked with in the past. She really likes the routine in that it means she doesn't have to participate too much in the
Um,
relationship. Husband says, "I really want something more here. Can we try different positions, toys, something new?" And to her, it's a threat. But
mhm.
she's unhappy also that she doesn't like the sex they're having. She doesn't like that it means so much to him and not as much to her. She doesn't like that he gets pouty when it doesn't happen. So their routine has really revolved around managing him and his mood and his moodiness through sex. And now that he wants more, she feels like it's taking away more from her. But what she really wants isn't
Is a
sex per
man,
se. She wants a man.
not a
She wants
child.
intimacy. She wants a
Yes,
king that'll treat her like a
yes,
queen. That's what
yes.
she's really
He
after.
wants more depth, more emotional intimacy, more knowing, not to have to
Yes,
take care of or manage childish behaviors.
Yeah, and
exactly.
I think the root of all this on both sides is connection, right? And
Mhm.
it's the way we go about it is completely different, but ultimately it's both. Like she's looking for that emotional connection of just being desired and wanted and taken care of in some ways in a sexual way. And he's looking at the I want to be chosen, right? And I want to know that you want me and that I am desirable. And so I think in this phase, as we get to the next one, we're trying to break out of that and we do it in two completely different ways. But ultimately, it's the same problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah. I have one more example of a phase three that highlights what you just said really well, Greg. This is a wife, they've had kids, they're done having kids, and she's ready for more. So she's like, I'm kind of interested in having my husband tie me up. I want to try some light bondage. And she's kind of sick and tired of her husband's premature ejaculation. It's like, we've lived with this for long enough. I'm really unsatisfied. It's really time that he addresses this. So that's like a hallmark of a phase 3. It's like, I really want something new, something different here, different than what we have, whether it's more depth with emotions or something more exciting sexually, but kind of sick of the old and I ready for something new.
And so that takes you to
Phase 4. So in phase 4, the hallmark of phase 4 is it's more about meaning seeking in sex or intimacy, I should say. Because you try the toys, you try the games, you try the positions, which are all exciting and fun, but you find out they kind of have a short shelf life
yeah, they're
because
pretty
there's
empty.
always, if that's all you seek, it'll be really empty,
Mhm.
right?
Right,
And
right.
you realize, yep. Now, it's a phase you go through, so it's not like they're bad, and it's not like you abandon novelty because it definitely has its place. But you
Mhm.
realize what I'm really after is something a lot more deep, something a lot
Mhm.
more alive, something that invites us to step into a different part of us that that's just filled with so much more positive meaning that's what you're really after. It's this closeness, it's this bond is what we're really after in it.
So not bondage, but a bond, huh?
Yeah. Other kind of bondage. Yep. Uh-huh.
I think that's when the meanings of choosing and being chosen really start to surface, and you start understanding what it means to choose and also to allow yourself to be chosen.
Right,
And I like
right.
what you said, Dan. Like it's those things you'll continue in the next phase. All those novelty you'll probably still play with, but as you understand the meaning, it's kind of giving a richness to it, and they
Mhm.
mean something else because you have a foundation that's different. Because you're now putting, what does it mean to be connected? What does it mean to have this physical relationship with another person?
What does it mean to give myself wholly and completely
Yeah,
to you
right.
or to receive what you give to me?
Yep.
There's a couple that we've worked with in the past where they kinda went through phase 2 for a long time. Sex was kinda routine, and then novelty became important. They were doing those things, and they're realizing there's probably more for us. So they really started to address some of the things that got created in the marriage all the way from phase 1. What
Mhm.
what messages do we receive? Why do we do the things we do? What things can we it's kinda like a deconstruction and reconstruction as they're
Mhm.
seeking more meaning in the relationship. And
Mhm.
they've really pushed themselves to think about these things and what does it mean to you when I touch you in this way? What's coming up for you? And something that this couple realized too, sex became far less about something they do, it's a place they go. It's
Mm.
a place we be together. It's something that it's like a meaning we like participating in. And so this is when they really realized we got to drop anything related to any sense of duty or obligation because that interferes with the meaning we actually want to create, which is a joyful place we both want to step in together. Because once you feel like you have to be there, there's no sense of freedom in it. And whew, passion
Right.
goes out the window.
So your sharing, Dan, reminded me of several different clients. And one of the spouses would have something like, if my spouse did this, then I would feel. And they're thinking that this is usually something in novelty. So they're usually like in a phase 2 of maintenance. And they're thinking, if my spouse just gave me oral or complimented me every day or did dot, dot, dot. I mean, the examples are endless. If my spouse just flirted with me more or texted me pictures or, did the thing,
Yes.
whatever the thing
Uh-huh.
is. They think the novelty of that is what will make them feel connected. And then they get
Right.
that thing, whatever that thing is, and they're
Uh-huh.
like, "Hey, I
It didn't
still don't
solve the
feel
thing.
it." And that's when I think they really start to understand that there has to be those deeper meanings, that the thing is neither good nor bad, right? Whether they flirt
Mhm.
or do this or do that, but it without the meanings connected, like the meanings of choosing or being chosen or loving or caring or being vulnerable or open. Like it doesn't, the thing isn't bad, but it doesn't create what they think it's going to.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think the one thing to realize is that, like you said, Dan, none of these phases are bad, right? And it's like the phases of emotional development. You can't really skip around, I don't think either,
No,
right?
you
Like
can't
you're going to
skip.
go from one to four right away. And so you need to appreciate where you're at and know that that's part of the learning process. You know, the novelty gets you out of the schedule, which the schedule got you out of, got you to where you could actually be connected in some ways and do things. And so each of them are building on each other. And
Mhm.
so if you find yourself in one of the phases, you're not broken. It's
Yeah,
not,
don't judge yourself.
something's not bad. It's just where you're at that time, and you may or may not be ready for the next one, right?
And I think
And it,
each phase is moving you forward in some direction, adding another layer, another broadening or expanding in a capacity.
yeah. And this is where you hear of couples that may go away for a weekend and they just really had a great connecting bonding experience.
Mhm.
And there might have been some novelty there. Maybe they went out, I don't know, tried different cuisine than they usually do, or a new city, or maybe even together they're trying and experimenting new things. But it's because they want to create a new meaning between them. Like meanings become far more important at this phase than the doing.
Right. I talk about this a lot of times with my client, just helping them see the desire or the meaning below it is far more powerful than the action or the thing. Meaning, like, if you are saying, I am choosing you, and in choosing you, this is how I'm going to show up, that's far more meaningful than just doing a thing to do a thing and check it off.
Well, we
Right.
also talk
Right.
about how you can do the exact same thing in two different meanings, and the
Yes.
outcome is very different, right?
From
So
different thoughts and
Right.
if I
feelings.
want to have this new novelty and I'm going to Amy because I want to connect to her in this way, and I say, hey, let's try this, and I really want to see what this does and have this connection. That's one thing. If I go and ask for the exact same thing because I need it to validate who I am, and I'm like, I'm just looking for some excitement for the night and to be over with it, we could go through the exact same motions and do the exact same things. We'll come out of it with a very different result. And that's, again, ties back to that meaning frame, right? It's tying the
Mhm.
meaning behind it. What is your intentions going into it? How are you asking? Are you thinking of the other person and the meaning that this could have with them?
Which then brings us to phase four. This is the surrender phase. And this is the phase where you can do and be done by the other spouse. And unfortunately, in our English language, it's a very vulgar and crass word, but this is where you can F each other and be effed completely and totally by each other. Thoroughly down to
Wholly,
the core,
completely.
wholly,
Mhm.
completely be with each other. It's two becoming one, I think, in the most beautiful sense of that. There's a story I read about a older couple. They've been married, I think, 40, 50 years. They're both semi-retired, so they both carry part-time jobs. They work Monday through Thursday. They're done by work around noon on Thursday. They come home and they prepare meals for the rest of the weekend that afternoon. So they're in the kitchen cutting like pieces of cheese and meat and getting things ready for the weekend. And then the festivities begin. They are in the bedroom all weekend long. And then Sunday night is when it all ends because they got to go back to work Monday morning. That's, I think, so beautiful. And they jokingly say, we used to have sex 3 times a week, but now we only have sex 1 time a week. But that one time lasts Thursday through Monday morning.
Great.
So,
Yeah, we have good friends that say, during the week, make it quick, whatever, blow my mind on the weekends, right? So it's like it might be routine during the week, but when it comes to the weekends, we have a little more time. It's interesting. We had this conversation just this last weekend. We got away to Virginia and had some time together, and we were just discussing why we think sometimes resetting and going away, it's novelty too, why it seems to be so different and so amazing. And I really think it's the time, right? When you have the time to put into it and you're not rushed to get out and do something else, that you're allowed just to let things happen as they happen. Simmer when they need to simmer, get a little exciting when it needs to get exciting. And it's not just like, oh, but it's got 10 minutes. We better get what we can right now, or 20 minutes or whatever it is. And so, really, when you get to that point of being able to just give into it, it's allowing that space to be filled with whatever comes with each other.
but this phase doesn't happen quickly. Phase 5 requires a very high amount of self that you're bringing to each other. Like, think about, I don't know, teenagers having sex for the first time. I They can barely look each other in the eye in the act, and it's over so quick, right?
Uh-huh.
Because there's no, like, self in the sex they're offering. He doesn't even know who he is yet, she doesn't she is yet, so there's no sharing of selves. Contrast that with something more in this phase 5. You know very well who you are. You also know your limitations and your shortcomings and also your strengths, but you're at peace with it. You can surrender into that. And so when you come together, it's like, this is all of me, and I'm bringing all of me, all the good, all the bad, everything. I'm bringing all of me to you, to us, to create something great together. So I think it requires a lot of development, a lot of maturity to get to phase 5.
And I think that starting in almost phase 2, maybe even back at phase 1, you were learning about that development. You were learning about that self. Are gaining a little bit in each phase, a little bit more self. And
Yes,
even the phase before of choosing, to actually choose is a complete act of self, right? I
yes,
choose you. And you can't actually really choose unless you are fully a self to make that choice.
right, right,
Let
right.
me throw something out here, Dan, since you are the creator of these phases. So I'm going to throw something in and see what you think here.
All right.
I think much like differentiation, where we have a scale of being enmeshed and we have a scale of being toxic independent, and we try to stay in the middle as much as possible. I feel as we're talking here that like I go through all these phases, and I continue to go all these phases. Sometimes I meet with Amy and it's just on schedule because that's all the time we have. And sometimes I have meaning to it. And sometimes I get to really surrender, but it's not every time. What do you think about that concept? Does that fit into these phases?
Yeah, it works with my personal experience too. Yeah. And I think that we're talking about phases here just as a general idea. Go, oh, for example, most of those I speak with are in 2 into 3. They're sick of the old routine, they want something new, and that friction of moving from 2 to 3 is prompting them to be coached. Or they might be in 3 moving to 4, and the friction caused there is prompting them to look for different answers, different something a little more in depth rather than a book of 101 sex positions. They want something
Right.
more meaningful and deep. So it's these crossroads of these phases, I think, is helps explain what's really going on inside of you and inside your relationship, kind of as a map and a guide. But the terrain is going to be whatever it really is in reality in your life. There's a couple, when they would have sex, it's a spiritual and emotional experience for him. It's like, in the presence of a goddess. This is such an amazing, beautiful experience for me. I feel, completely enthralled with your beauty. I just really like what this does to me, and just for a moment in time, it's as if we have no friction between us. There's no animosity between us. There's no, like, irritants. I just feel completely, absolutely in love with you. And she's like, "Oh, that's interesting. I I just got a lot of physical pleasure out of it. I don't get that deep meaning that you do." And so it's like, I don't feel that way, you know? The orgasm was nice, thank you very much, but I don't I don't get that out of it. And he's like, "Well, when do you feel close to me?" Other things like the other day when you were wrestling with our kids on the floor, I felt that way. It's like, "What?"
Yeah.
And like, it doesn't make sense. Anyway, I I I to each their own. Like, there are going to be some things that are going to be really meaningful to one person in this current whatever phase you are in that are going to look different for the other. And it doesn't mean one is good and one is bad or one is better than the other. But coming to an being curious and really open-minded and understanding, oh, this is the way my spouse experiences me, will really help you move through the phases a little bit faster rather than being critical or judgmental or offended that your spouse doesn't share the same perspective or preferences as you do.
Yeah, that's always the key that we find in our coaching, right? And again, we go back to trying to get people to be in a differentiated state. And that means being whole unto yourself, but wanting and to be close to someone and care about that person so much that it's close to you. And that means there's tons of differences. So we talked about how so many differences. I had this wonderful, beautiful experience this weekend. I was traveling back to meet Amy in Virginia, and I was going to fly out of Ronald Reagan Airport, and I needed to get an Uber, and I got an Uber ride. And my friend that picked me up was this beautiful transgender person. And we had this beautiful conversation all the way down. It was an hour ride down to Reagan Airport. And one of the things we talked about was she was talking about how why can't we just disagree? Why can't we just get along, and it's okay if we have different ideas? And we really talked about on this matter for a while about how the difference in each other is so important. How boring would life be if everything was flat? If you look at a painting and there was no different textures
Or
colors,
contrast.
it would be the most boring painting in the whole entire world. And yet we spend our whole lives trying to get everyone to agree with us and be exactly like us. But yet that's the texture of life. And I think that's the same way in our marriages and our relationships, is we spend so much time trying to get them to believe that they need to be like us or see things through our lens and we're the right ones. And when we can back away from that and realize that the differences is what adds the textures and the beauty to our relationships,
the interest and the contrast.
What's what allows us to be free and really have that Eros energy take over, because we are so different. It really helps. And we spend a lot of time with our couples coaching them, no matter what phase they're in. That's kind of seems to be the underlying thing that has to be taken care of first, right, Dan? Is like, we have to realize that we are two different people coming together, trying to have this relationship, which is a singular thing. And that if we can be curious and wanting to understand where the other one's coming from as you speak, and look at that as a plus, not a minus, it really helps paint that relationship in a different meaning frame.
Oh, I like that.
see. I do too. Thanks, babe. I see so many couples who come, and one of the first things they say is, "We're so different." I'm like, bravo. That must mean you're perfectly matched.
Uh-huh.
Right.
I mean, we
Did
do
my-
generally pick our opposite. And so,
And you generally don't choose someone who has a completely different value system than you do.
right. Just
Just
preferences
the way you
or
express those values are going to be in
Right.
opposites. But yeah.
tidy versus organized, or, planned versus free, or
And there's not to say that there's some serious things if you have a major chasm between you that need to be taken care of, right? There's not,
Right.
we're not saying that when we say this, because there are some things that need to be addressed, and we can help coach through those and understand. And you can ask for people to grow in certain ways if that's the case. But in general, like, we're different, right? There's usually a higher desire, a lower desire. There's usually someone that likes to go on walks and someone that doesn't like to go on walks. We have this differences, and we often run from them. Let's embrace them, be curious about them, and enjoy them.
Well,
Great. Very good.
Well, Dan, it's been such a pleasure. Please let our audience know if they would like to get a hold of you and find out more about you. How can they do that?
Great. The best place is my website, getyourmarriageon.com. I also have an Instagram, Get Your Marriage On. We have a private Facebook group that's become really popular lately, so you can find us on Facebook at Get Your Marriage On. My app's Intimately Us, as you mentioned. It's free on the Apple App Store, Google Play Store. That's a great place to begin. And it really is an app designed for couples that want to add more spice and fun and excitement to the relationship, and implements a lot of these phase 1 through 5 ideas that we've talked about. There's something in there for every phase of the journey. And of course, Amy and I work together in the Get Your Marriage On program, formerly known as Next Level. That's where we work together with couples to improve sexual intimacy, or overall intimacy for that matter, in their relationships.
emotional, mental, physical, all of them.
Well, awesome. We really appreciate your time here.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Please share it, along with our apps Intimately Us and Just Between Us, with your married friends. I promise they will thank you for life. If you want a more meaningful, sexual, and intimate connection in your marriage, I invite you to check out my Get Your Marriage On program. Over 100 couples have said this program packs tremendous value and has helped their intimacy grow to the next level. Now, go get your marriage on.